Right, so I hope that's given us enough time for any stragglers. But I think Jess will have a recording of this, which we can share afterwards if people do want to catch up. So let me just grab my notes screen. Bear with me a second. Right, perfect. So, well, first of all, welcome to the webinar today on information security, and a bit of an introduction as well to ISO 27001. My name is Matt Riley, and I'm the Quality and Compliance Director for Complete IT. I've been with Complete IT 7 years now, over 7 years now, and prior to that I was sort of 6 years within the NHS. And just some background in this as well, in my role at Complete IT and within Sharp UK, I'm the data protection lead and sort of wear the information security hat. In addition to that, again, I'm a GDPR practitioner and an ISO 27001 practitioner. So my background isn't technical, so what this won't be today is you should have this X firewall set, etc. We'll go through a lot of general principles of information security and a mini agenda for us all. What is it? We'll go through what type of accreditations are out there, then specifically focus on ISO 27001, why go for it, and hopefully at the end we'll wrap up with 7 sort of practical tips for improving information security. But again, there won't be firewall rules this, permission sets that. It's going to be sort of practical tips that hopefully, again, businesses can implement at low cost or no cost in some of the cases, because actually it's much more around the way the business operates and what you do, as opposed to necessarily just lining up technical measure after technical measure. So hopefully that's what everyone wanted to gain from it, and we'll do a question and answer session. Feel free to use the question session as a part of Zoom, and Jess will fire some over to me at the end so we can see if we can go through them, and if I can't answer the question, what I'll do is I'll get back to you as well on an individual basis. So first thing really to cover off is, what is information security? Fundamentally, although it's a triangle, there are 3 pillars of information security. That's maintaining availability, maintaining and ensuring integrity, and maintaining and ensuring confidentiality. So it's the preservation of all 3 of these. The availability is making sure your systems are up to be used. So again, information security, or InfoSec, and GDPR. So GDPR itself just looks at personal data of the natural living person. So I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and information security effectively covers all of that, but it also covers making sure you protect trade secrets, your intellectual property, your customer lists, anything of value to your business that's data. So GDPR fits inside of it, because actually personal data is very important, make sure it's protected. But the idea is it encompasses everything you do as a business and all the information you have. And there is quite a big crossover. And one of the reasons why ISO 27001 is good is Article 32 of the GDPR, if everybody wants to have a good nighttime read, talks about the security of personal data. And it is accepted that ISO 27001 are good and proportional measures, which both technical and operation, that can be put into place to ensure your compliance with Article 32. So again, if you're wanting to really put the belts and braces in place to make sure you've got the right technical and operational measures to help protect your data under GDPR, ISO 27001 is a really good place to start with that. Although I appreciate it's not often a starting place when we're talking information security. So there are, within the SME sector, really 3 accreditations that you could go for as a small business. Now, most people will be aware of these, and actually a lot of the businesses we work with have worked through these as well. So again, just as a summary, Cyber Essentials, if you again sign up and achieve this, you can have this kite mark, put it on your website. It's a self-assessment piece, so you fill in a long questionnaire, and again, from a technical perspective, our teams can help. And it's lots of questions around operating procedures and some technical measures you put in place. It's reviewed externally by I always get this acronym wrong, but the National Cybersecurity Centre certified organisation, to make sure that, again, those basic principles you've said are there. Again, it's self-certified, so if you say they're there, then they're going to have to believe that they're there. So it doesn't mean, if you're working with someone with Cyber Essentials certified, it's good, it's a good framework, but it won't solve their cybersecurity challenges. And again, you working with them, you won't know that they've actually got them in place. You can only assume. But again, differentiating yourself from your competitors, that's a good kite mark to start with. The next level up, as such, is the Cyber Essentials Plus, and this really starts to focus in on more technical controls. So again, we won't touch on these too much, but making sure you've got good firewalls and they're configured correctly. The way you set up is secure. You have controls in place so people can have access to A, not B, and B, not C. You've got some form of malware protection, which again historically has always been antivirus, spam filtering, etc., to help stop them coming through the door, and that you've got a good patch management strategy in place. Last technical stuff we talk about, I promise. And what this does is it requires an independent assessment of those controls. So again, when you're out for tender or looking at tenders, that Cyber Essentials Plus, you know that organisation has got those controls in place that it said it was. And again, when you're selling yourselves to your potential customers, you can go, actually, we've been audited to say we have achieved all of these, which again is hopefully a good thing. And the final, the bigger one of the three, is ISO 27001. So the Information Security Management 27001. It was originally a BSI certification, which was then adapted internationally. And we'll go much more into this very shortly. It is, as the other two, it's externally accredited and audited. So we'll talk about briefly an auditing schedule, and you can see R1 as well, just to give you some extra references. So ISO 27001, apologies in advance, this is a bit of a wordy slide, but try to get as much in. So yes, it's an international standard for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and most importantly, continually improving your information security management system. So whatever framework you build into your organization, it's there to make sure that it's continuous, improving, and that you're learning from your mistakes, because we all make them. So yes, Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus mainly focus on technical measures with some of the operational measures. ISO 27001 expands these technical measures quite significantly, and also includes a load of operational measures, policies, procedures, processes that you need to adopt, and importantly, evidence that you're doing. Biggest thing around ISO 27001 is providing evidence that you're doing what you say you will. So if you're saying you are actively managing your starters and leavers process, but you've got no documentation to show that, the auditors are going to put a big red line through it. So it is about demonstrating. It has to be owned by top management in the business. So I talk to a lot of IT managers, and they sort of say, we're wanting to go for ISO 27001, what do we do? And the first thing I'll always ask is, who's sponsoring this within the business? And they usually go, I've been asked, it's one of my objectives to achieve. If it's not sponsored by top management, you won't ever be able to achieve it, because it's such a big part of any organization. From the ground up, building information security into everything you do, you need that commitment. This is not one of these things you can just do on a whim. You can't just choose to pop out for the weekend and create your ISO 27001 manual. It is really about being sponsored from the top. And again, talking about evidence and demonstration, this has to be demonstrated at top management. So a particular example, our senior management team, every senior management meeting we have, I present all of our information security policies, manuals, procedures, objectives, incident reports to that group, so everyone in that group is aware. So again, from top down. Again, as mentioned, it's accredited by an external auditing body. We happen to use an organisation in High Wycombe for ours. Once you have your initial accreditation, it's valid for 3 years, but you have to have annual audits to make sure that you're doing what you say you will. So you can outright fail those audits. It's a bit like a driver's test. You've got majors and minors. So in your surveillance audits, they're called, you will have majors or minor infringements of what you said you'll do. If you get a major, you don't lose your accreditation there and then, but if you don't show any progress towards recovering, they can take it off you. It doesn't happen particularly often because it is quite rare, because again, to get your accreditation in the first place, this needs to be built into what the organisation does and how it does it. So it is quite difficult sometimes to, well, it would be quite difficult to fail. And finally, it's a framework based on risk management. So again, you identify, as part of this, you'll be identifying your information security management risks. You'll be thinking about, do we need to do anything about them? And then if you do, going and doing something and applying. And the way you do this is through the standard itself. So actually one of the nice things about ISO 27001, it tells you what you need to go and do. So I've got a copy of it in my hand. It's a thrilling read, but effectively it's made up of 2 parts. Ignoring the numbering convention, there is, within all these ISO documents, there is numbering conventions, and always from 0.4 onwards is where effectively where the document starts. But you have a number of compulsory clauses, which to be able to comply and be accredited, you have to achieve. And they are things like, again, demonstrating management are involved, demonstrating you understand your risks, demonstrating that where you've had an incident that you've learned from it and you document that. And then when you are doing your risk assessments, what ISO 27001 does is in Annex A, give you 114 things you could do to effectively mitigate, treat, terminate, or tolerate that risk. So one of the objectives, the pieces we'll go through together at the end are some of those controls that you can implement as a business that are quite easy to do. The control categories typically are grouped. So you've got physical security, you've got HR, policies, procedures, you've got things like what to do with portable media, hard drives, etc. You've got malware protection. So these are big top level categories. And not every one of the controls will apply to every business. We don't have internally any app development. So the big section in Annex A around application development, CIT doesn't have to do anything with. Sharp, as our parent company, do. They have built their own in-house system, so they have to follow that. So again, organisation A will be different to organisation B. And the real thing is, well, why would you want to do this? It is not a small investment. In any stretch of the imagination, but it really differentiates you from your competitors. Like with the cyber security piece, Complete IT works with a lot of charities. When they go out to tender, having ISO 27001 or Cyber Essentials Plus on that tender will set them apart from a lot of their competitors, because it just shows that they take that information security really seriously as a part of a business. It demonstrates that maintaining, again, data protection, GDPR, and information security are core and really important to your organisation, which again, I work with lots of our suppliers when they have issues around GDPR, and you can quite quickly tell the ones that have data protection frameworks and information security frameworks in place and others that don't. And we choose not to work with those. Again, as I touched on, you reduce your risks associated with GDPR. If you have a breach and you're ISO 27001 compliant, it doesn't mean you're going to get away scot-free. But what you can demonstrate is that we put all these measures in place that are proportional to our business. And unfortunately, this event still did happen. And actually, that's then looked on positively by the ICO, because actually, you can never be 100% secure, and you never will be. And finally, it's designed to allow the business to achieve its goals through continuous improvement, as opposed to blocking them. And one of the questions I often get asked is, do you have to tie everything down so it's really strictly locked? No. We have a sales system. If we locked all of our salespeople down to look at just 2 or 3 clients, for example, if someone else called in, each time that happens, they're either going to have to be passed to someone else, they're going to have to get permission to have access. It's not practical. Now, what you do as a part of your risk assessment is you'll say, this is a risk. How big is its risk for this person having access to 10 things as opposed to 5? Is it big enough? No, not really. We're happy with that they can have that access. So it has to be proportional to the business, and it shouldn't hinder the way the business works, obviously up to a certain risk level. But again, the question I get asked quite a bit is, I want to get it done. But one thing is you can't just get ISO done. It's not quick, it's not easy, it's not cheap, and it's not something you can really just choose to, do you know, this week I'm going to do a project to get us to ISO 27001 compliance. So again, because it's invested from the top, give you some context, my role at the moment is purely around ISO 27001 and GDPR across both the organisations I work for. But again, it's a big investment in time, money and effort to do it. So it's not just something you can do quickly. Quick examples of our audit schedule. So when you, apologies, just a second. Oh, sorry about that. When you're going for an accreditation, you sign up for the audits. So there are getting your accreditation, there are 2 sets of audits, and again, Complete IT's scope for our 27001 is all of our offices. So that audit's quite big. So you'll have 9 days with our external consultants prior to them signing off us as 27001 compliant. And again, our parent company Sharp, very similar sort of size and scale. And then they're going to do annual audits of it. So you have year 1, stage 1, stage 2, then year 2 and 3 as annual audits, with the following year effectively back to the start again. And they will go around and ask people questions. They will ask your team questions on information security. One of the great examples I had was the auditor went up to one of our team and said, could you log into this system for me? And she made the auditor turn around, stand by the wall, looking at the wall while she put her password in. We all had a good chuckle at that afterwards, but she was doing the exact right thing because she knew she had to protect her password from a visitor to that office. He happened to be the auditor. She did know that, but that was really, really good. Although he did find it quite funny. And we also have internal auditors across both businesses. So the idea is that over a year, we will do mini audits of all of everything we do to make sure we're compliant for the main audits. So it's quite a big exercise. But what a lot of businesses will do is they'll sort of put in place a lot of the ISO 27001 controls and not go for the audits. Yes, if you want the kite mark of ISO 27001, it's great, but it is a cost, as you can clearly see from this. But one of the things we'll go through at the end is some of the steps you can put in place. But again, if you do have an issue, GDPR breach, for example, someone gets into your systems, you can go, these are all the controls we have in place. We've just chosen not to get the accreditation. Again, you'll be looked upon kindly, as opposed to someone that just doesn't put anything in place. One of the things I also wanted to raise around ISO 27001, when my screen does kick forwards, is it can be made scalable. So Complete IT has chosen to go for everything we do around ISO 27001, so it encompasses everything. But ISO can be really narrowed down to a single office, single department, single service, single process. So if you're selling something and it's you could just get a 27001 accredited. It doesn't have to be everything. You set your own scope for ISO 27001, and you publish that. So as a part of ISO 27001, our scope is this, and we achieved this. So it's one of the real key things when you're talking to organisations, regardless of what they do. If they go, yeah, we're 27001 ISO compliant, you need to ask for that scope. what are you 27001 compliant in? Oh, actually, it's just this one process in our HR department. Okay, perfect. Well, we're not going to be dealing with your HR department. We're going to be dealing with your sales side. So from our perspective, you're not 27001 compliant. So it is something really to keep an eye out on for. But again, if you want to go for it, we've gone all out for complete IT. You might choose not to. And you can also exclude things from scope as well. So we've, as many people might know, we've just opened 2 offices in Manchester and Birmingham as a part of our merger with Sharp. In the first round of audits, while they're becoming complete IT offices, they're not in our scope. But by the time we come around for our first next audit next year, first audit next year, yeah, that's right, we'll include them in. So what can you do without the expense of a full accreditation? So I've got 7 hopefully handy points that you can do. And first of all, again, it's true for GDPR, purely looking at personal data, but all information security in general, is document what you have, what's stored on it, who has access to it, and physically who has what. So again, we internally use a free tool called Asset Tiger, and basically that I can log into Asset Tiger, look at myself, for example, and know what physical devices I have, phone, laptop, what cloud systems I have access to, Office 365, our ConnectWise, Asset Tiger itself, and my permissions within that. So it is really about understanding who in your team has access to what, and actually agreeing what they should have access to in the first place. And it sort of leads on to our second point, and have in place robust starter, leaver, and change of role processes. So someone joins, you know exactly what they should have access to. Typically when we get requests, it's give this new starter the same access as this person, which is absolutely fine, but you just need to be really sure that that's correct. You should always minimize what people have access to. But again, as touched on earlier, it shouldn't be at the detriment of their job. Information security is there to support making sure people have the right access, not prevent everyone have access to it. So yeah, but most important, and this is where most people forget, change of roles. If, for example, we have one of our help desk become a technical consultant, as happens often, it's a good career path for a lot of them, what they require access to will change. So we have internal processes to say that this person did need access to these systems. In their new job, they don't. Because the risk you have is something goes wrong and they have access to stuff they shouldn't. But again, really, really important around this is that leavers process. Now, leavers, sometimes they go at very short notice. Then they might not be happy about leaving. So making sure everything they have access to is locked out almost immediately is really important. Not that a lot of people go back and steal data, for example, but it is really important that you lock them out. And as a part of leavers process is getting kit returned. So say a leaver leaves, doesn't return the kit, technically that's a GDPR breach, because a member and someone who shouldn't have access to your data then has access to your data. And I just can't emphasize enough the leavers piece. Based on, let's get back a slide, based on knowing what they have access to and what they physically have, you then know what they need to be removed access from when they do leave. So again, knowing what their job is, knowing what kit they need, what accesses should they have, and what software do they need, and limiting it to that. It's a really important step. Just as a note, we are looking at implementing a slight change to our starter leaver process to enhance this further. We'll sort of be communicating what that looks like over the coming weeks as well, but it really adds in layers of approval and thought process to say, does someone really need that? Hopefully that'll be a really big benefit. Having set that all out, when you've got your existing team, again, review what they currently have. What we're doing is a big process of reviewing where roles have changed and going and changing them now that we have a really good standard in place. So it does really link to it. But again, it's a piece of work that every organization should do to make sure everybody in their current role has the right access. And again, it shouldn't hinder business process. It just secures it. Simple one, especially with Windows 10, is make sure all your devices are encrypted. If you lose an encrypted device and it hasn't got the password stuck on it, that was an example I did hear of. They encrypted the device, but the person who lost it had a post-it note stuck on it with their username and password. It's not encrypted at that point, really. If it's encrypted and it's lost, you don't have to declare it to the ICO. If a device is unencrypted and left on a train and it has anything sensitive on it, it would need to be reported to the ICO. So again, encryption of all devices, anything that you use to move data around, and to be fair, anything that stands still. Well, a lot of people will have USBs, portable hard drives. That data should all be encrypted again. The risk of it being lost, at least if it's lost and it's encrypted, you can be pretty confident, especially if you do the top level encryptions, that no one's going to be able to have access to that, even if they do try. So encryption, really big win. Number 5, have such a mouthful, but have an information security incident management policy. So actually something goes wrong, you know how to respond to it, you can get to the root cause of it, and it's really important to learn from it. Whenever we have across our group of companies any form of incident, we fill in and work through some incident forms, and the last big section is what could we have done differently to prevent it from happening next time. And that's where in the event of a GDPR breach, the ICO will frown upon non-learning. If you've identified things you could do and you've said you're going to do them and you don't do them, they're not going to be look at you particularly fondly. And it is really important to document learning. Also, if the recommendation of the learning is going to be far too expensive, the business is not proportional, document that. Because actually, again, if it was, the learning would be to implement a very expensive system, for example. Well, most businesses can't afford to do that. So just document that reason why. But again, this doesn't have to be particularly complicated. In my role, I work with whoever's internally, wherever the issues occurred, or with a supplier. And quite often, for us, more often than not, it's a supplier issue. And look at what else we can do to make things better going forward. It's that continuous improvement piece of ISO 27001. So yeah, nice and easy to do. The next bit is actually know who you have in your offices. And this, I love the example of that, as I touched on earlier on, the team member that challenged the auditor to look away. This auditor was a visitor to the office, and obviously was working under the terms of audit, but it could have been anyone. And she was very right in saying you can't have access to it. But at least knowing who you have in your building is really, really important, and identifying them as visitors. So your team can challenge them to say, sorry, who are you? There would be nothing worse than having an open office that someone can walk in and just literally pop into your server room. Or what actually happens in one of the biggest categories of GDPR breaches is the theft of physical data. So someone walks in, sees some important documents, or takes some important documents. So again, you can go from simple visitor books with name badges to nice, shiny systems that check people in and out, and you'll see them as well as you go into a lot of corporate entities. The big thing to remember is you're going to be, in both instances, you're going to be collecting data on your visitors. So you need to think of GDPR for that. Visitor books often get left on tables overnight. Someone, in theory, could break in and steal that visitor book. Technically, you've then got a GDPR breach. And that's why some of the technical systems that do tend to cost more money can help prevent breaches in that respect as well. So again, know who's in your building, document who's in your building, and challenge your staff to challenge them on why they're there. And finally, the simplest one is get yourself a copy of ISO 27001. Some of it's a bit wordy, a bit technical, etc. But the controls, the Annex A controls, are fantastic at going, that's a really easy win for our business. Just knowing that, again, we use a company called R3 Environmental to dispose of all of our kit. We recommend them to our clients as well. Having that in place and document you have that in place, easy win. You can then go, actually, we had some data, we know it escaped, we know it wasn't that kit because we use this accredited company. A bit of advice, the actual policy to get it from BSI is about 150 to 200 pounds. You can get them from like the Swedish, and I think I got mine from the Swiss Data Protection Institute, and they're much cheaper. So you do pay in euros. I think I paid about 120 euros for our policy, but they do charge you through the teeth, but it's not a big expense. And again, obviously you can work with our technical consultants on any technical measures, but actually a lot of the operational measures in here are nice and easy to do. So just get yourself a copy of it. I'd love to share you our copy, but it's got Complete IT watermarked all over it. So we'd be quite frowned upon if we did. But yeah, somewhere like the Swiss Data Protection is exactly the same document, even in English. Okay, Jess can't hear anything, so that's useful.
I can hear you now.
Yes.
Right, so are we moving on to questions? Sorry,
yes,
I
please.
lost for a second there. So the first question we've got through is, which role or business function would you ideally expect to manage the project of a whole business seeking ISO 27001?
Good question. It really does depend on per businesses. So I sit centrally. So my role, I report into our managing director, but I work really closely with our head of HR, our heads of all of our departments. So my role is to coordinate ISO across both the businesses I work in. So ideally, it's actually an independent person, because one of the real challenges, so for example, at Complete IT, I head up our ISO 27001. We had to get a separate auditor. There's no reason why, what we don't want is a conflict of interest. So I can't audit my own work. But also putting your head of IT, for example, as the person implementing ISO 27001 is a conflict of interest. And some of the controls within the compulsory piece of ISO 27001 is about making sure you don't get those conflict of interests. The biggest picture, just to give you context, the people I talk to most within Complete IT is our head of IT, Dan, and Rebecca in our HR department. So there isn't a correct answer for that one, is the honest answer. So sorry, I was a bit rambling, I suppose.
Okay, the next question, what is a GDPR practitioner and when would I think about becoming one?
So GDPR practitioner is, that was a 5-day course, talking through all about the GDPR, going through all the different articles, not in some of them, not in huge amount of depth. So how you have a really good understanding of what you need to do. And it's the practical elements of what you need to be doing as a business to become GDPR compliant. So, okay, well, here's an example. All businesses have privacy notices. So as a part of that GDPR practitioner course, it's how to write one, what to include, and when looking at privacy notices, what good looks like, what bad looks like, and then making informed decisions off the back of that around if you want to be working with those organisations. So yeah, it's really the practical side of implementing a GDPR framework into a business. So yeah, if that's your role, or to be honest, if you have an interest in GDPR compliance, there aren't a huge amount of people that do, funnily enough. It's a course I think I did it with IT governance, really good course to go through. And I learned a lot from the back of it.
Perfect. And what would you say is the single biggest benefit of having ISO as a business?
For us, it's often requested. We often get asked for ISO 27001 compliance, and I get quite a lot of now is questionnaires, information security questionnaires, because businesses want to work with businesses that take information security seriously, and this is a very big way of demonstrating that. I got a questionnaire the other day. It had 100 questions in it, and this was a standard one that organisation used. All but about 10 were answered by our ISO 27001. Our responses to that allowed us to actually win that tender, because we were the only one within that group, for us working with new organisations, that took information security that seriously. So for us, very much about differentiation in the marketplace.
Perfect. Oh, there's another one just come in. Like GDPR, to correctly manage this is, hang on, let me just read this first, sorry.
Yes, sorry, yeah, very much. Sorry, I can see now it's popped up on my screen.
Great.
Yeah, very much. It is about documenting. So again, you might choose to live with a risk, and that's absolutely fine as long as you can justify it. Where it becomes a challenge is, for example, I mean, there's the whole piece around cost-benefit analysis that you can dig into. But if it's something that's nice and quick and simple to do it, and you choose not to do it, even if you document it, you're still going to be frowned upon. But again, where it would be implementing X, Y, and Z that's going to cost you tens of thousands of pounds, having that documented. We looked at option A, we looked at option B, we looked at option C. A and B were too expensive or too intrusive or whatever it might be. You've documented it and you've gone with C. In the event of something going wrong, a breach, for example, whatever that might be, you can at least, when asked the questions by the ICO, and they will ask you these questions, you can go, they'll go, why didn't you do this? Here it is where we documented it was too expensive, too intrusive, too big for our business. So yeah, that documentation piece is really, really important. Why you do or don't have something.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. There's been a lot of documentation already. And it's actually, from my point of view, as marketing director, it's been really, really interesting going through absolutely everything we do, all of the data. I was surprised by the fact that we were actually in a really good position with some things that I may not have thought we would be. And there were other areas that there were just smaller things that we could change to make a big difference with regards to this. So it's been really informative so far. And there aren't any questions coming through unless anyone's got any more quickly for Matt. There's something in the chat. If we decide to start with applying for ISO 27001 with just one process, what would be a good one to pick?
Thanks for the question. I think it would be something that effectively you sell. Because using an example, I did speak to an organisation that were 27001 compliant. I asked them for their scope, and it was one of their offices that we'd have nothing to do with as our relationship with them. So actually, for me, when I looked at our other suppliers or potential suppliers, I chose someone else. So again, really decide on what would you effectively as your business, what you'd be able to sell, and that would in that sales process would make you different. Yeah, hopefully that I wouldn't. If you did want to have a little discussion, anyone who answered the question, talk through it a little bit. I'm more than happy to have a chat, just to sort of say actually that might be a good place to start. But without knowing a bit more context, it would be difficult to answer that one.
We've got another question just come in. One of the biggest challenges for my organisation is using self-employed staff working on sensitive investigations and reports. Can a ISO 27001 controls approach help with this?
Yeah, it definitely can. So a big part of anything you do is about, and it's with GDPR as well, is about accountability. So saying, even if they're a contractor, having the good terms and conditions in place as a part of that contract with them is very good, but also then the access controls for them having access to that data is really important. Get them right. I'm trying to think of a particular example. We actually don't use contractors ourselves. No, I can't think of any particular examples that are really good. But yeah, it's about effectively the contract, not contract of employment, the contract of working with that contractor, and what you then grant them access to. And again, documenting why they have access, what lawful reason you are sharing it with for them, what they're doing with that data, making sure they've only got what they need, and they're not keeping it. So again, you stop that contract within your So you finish with that contract. When that contract's finished, you should make sure and get positive confirmation from them that any data that they've not taken, any data they've used during that period, they've deleted, which would be the same as your contract of employment with a team member. You just have a slightly different version of that contract with them. So I hope that answered.
Perfect. I think that looks like that's it for the questions. Thank you very much, Matt.
No worries, happy to help.
And we'll be sending out the invite for next week's webinar, which is all around Microsoft 365 tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.